The 14th, 2022 regular city council meeting. Robert, can you read the executive order and identify, first read the executive order for me.
Sure, I'll go ahead and kick that over to Harrison, if you don't mind.
Sure. On March 3rd, 2020, Governor Newsom proclaimed a state of emergency due to the COVID-19 pandemic that remains in effect. This meeting will be held remotely consistent with Executive Order N2920 and Assembly Bill 361, modifying provisions of the Brown Act to allow teleconference meetings at the current time. Members of the public are encouraged to participate remotely via Zoom or telephone pursuant to the information and link below. The council will take public comment or by email or by speaking at the meeting. Members of the public are entitled to provide public comment once on each agenda item when it is called. Those who wish to comment on an agenda item during the meeting should use the raised hand function or should write, "I wish to make a public comment" in the chat section. If you have called into the meeting and wish to speak, please press *9. Council will not entertain comments made in the chat function. Upon being recognized by the mayor, please limit your oral statement to no more than 3 minutes. The public may also submit comments in advance of the meeting or during the meeting by emailing the city clerk at clerk@cityofbelvedere.org. Please write "public comment" in the subject line. Comments submitted 1 hour prior to the commencement of the meeting will be presented to the City Council and included in the public record for the meeting.
Thank you, Harrison. Robert, could you do a roll call, please, and then identify staff that are present?
Sure. Councilmember Campbell.
Present.
Councilmember Chemnitzer.
Present.
Councilmember Lynch.
Here.
Councilmember Mark.
Here.
And Mayor Wilkinson.
Present.
The staff present tonight are Irene Borba, Director of Planning and Building, Tony Boyd, Director of Public Works, Helga Cotter, Administrative Services Director, Brand Vianson, Building Official, Jason Wu, Chief of Police, and Harrison Tregenza, who's our interim city clerk. We also have several members from other jurisdictions here tonight. I'll not call them out. I think we're going to invite them and have them talk a little bit later when their items come up.
Thank you, Robert. Okay, we'll move on to open forum. This is an opportunity for any citizen to briefly address the City Council on any matter that does not appear on this agenda. Upon being recognised, please limit your oral statement to no more than 3 minutes. Matters that appear to warrant a more lengthy presentation or council consideration may be placed on the agenda for further discussion at a later meeting. Harrison, could you please let me know if there's anyone wishing to make public comment and bring those into the meeting, please?
Sure. First, we have William Rothman with his hand raised.
Great. Good evening, Dr. Rothman.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Thank you.
Very much. When 600 votes had been counted, Measure D was behind by 27 votes. Now, approximately 1,000 have been counted, and Measure D is behind by 100 votes. I think there's maybe 100 more out there waiting to be counted, but even if there were 200, it appears evident that the council has achieved what no previous council has ever achieved. It has put on the ballot an initiative that went down to resounding defeat. It quoted in the Independent Journal, Mayor Wilkinson said that she plans to go ahead, that somebody or other had always planned to do this, whether or not Measure D passed. That's obviously nonsense, and at least in my opinion, it's nonsense. And she says she's hoping to have a shovel-ready project. I was thinking of shovels because, as they say, if you're digging in the wrong hole, the very first thing to do is to stop digging. So before you spend any more time and money, I think you're in for $300,000 for this EIR, which in reading it, it's really defective. Please stop, realize that you made a mistake, go back, rethink it, figure out what the people really want and what they don't want, But for goodness sakes, don't persist. You've alienated yourselves, the government of the city of Belvedere, from its public, and that's never happened before. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Rothman. Harrison, is there anybody else wishing to make public comment?
Yeah, next we have David Mahler.
Okay, bring him in. Good evening, David.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Well, good evening, Mayor Wilkinson, council members and staff. As you know, my name is David Mahler. I live in Larkspur, and I'm part of the Marin Sonoma Building Electrification Squad. I want to say we're very pleased to see in Belvedere's revised response to the Marin Civil Grand Jury report on building electrification, which is item 9 on tonight's consent calendar, that staff is committing to complete its feasibility evaluation of the grand jury's recommendations by December of this year. That feasibility evaluation shouldn't be very difficult for the grand jury's first recommendation that all Marin jurisdictions adopt a REACH code requiring that new construction be all electric to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions that are driving climate change. This is because 2 Marin jurisdictions have already adopted the all-electric REACH code. That's Fairfax and San Anselmo, and 3 more are expected to adopt it within the next 2 weeks: Marin County, San Rafael, and Corte Madera. And several other jurisdictions are close behind and expected to adopt the all REACH code by early 23. It also shouldn't be very hard to complete Belvedere's feasibility evaluation of the REACH code setting energy efficiency targets for major remodels, as Fairfax has already adopted it and Marin County is expected to adopt it tomorrow, and several other jurisdictions are expected to adopt it by early 23. As part of its feasibility evaluation, we'd like to encourage Belvedere to discuss these 2 REACH codes, as well as the county's 3rd proposed REACH code for enhanced EV charger requirements at one of Belvedere's next 1 or 2 council meetings. The all-electric for new buildings and EV charger REACH codes aren't controversial. They don't require additional staff time to implement compared to the California 22 building code update that Belvedere will hear the first reading of tonight as agenda item 13. And additionally, the Marin County Sustainability Team will be preparing collateral materials to assist the jurisdictions with implementation of all 3 REACH codes. So we'd like to urge Belvedere to move ahead with discussion and adoption of all 3 green building REACH codes, and especially the all-electric for new construction and enhanced EV charger REACH codes. Doing so will help achieve several actions that Belvedere just committed to in its new Climate Action Plan 2030, and will help Belvedere meet its greenhouse gas reduction goals. The longer we put off the transition away from fossil fuels, the worse our climate crisis will become. And with comparable state or regional action 5 to 7 years off, it really is up to local jurisdictions, which are more nimble, to fill the regulatory time gap. In fact, adopting these 3 REACH codes really is among the few actions local jurisdictions can take to directly reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So in conclusion, we all need you to take action to help reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And we ask that you please add discussion and adoption of the 3 green building REACH codes to one of your next few council meeting agendas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Harrison, is there anybody else wishing to make public comment?
No other raised hands, Mayor.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, so we'll move on to reports and presentations. Before we do that, I see that Jana is available. So what I would like to do is move up item 18, which is to receive an annual report on the city's measures to protect and improve Belvedere's parks, open spaces and lanes, to be item number 4, so that we can get that piece moving. But I believe I need a vote from City Council to do that. So could somebody make that motion?
I'll move that motion, James Campbell.
Could I get a second, please?
I'll second. Lynch.
Great, and a roll call, please.
Sure. Councilmember Campbell,
Aye.
Councilmember Chemnitzer,
Aye.
Councilmember Lynch,
Yes.
Councilmember Mark,
Yes.
Mayor Wilkinson.
Yes, motion passes. Okay, we'll move on to City Council reports. Does any member of the City Council have anything that they'd like to bring to today's meeting? Seeing none, I will move on to the City Manager report. Robert, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Wilkinson, and members of the council and public. I'd like to start out by giving a quick shout out to the Planning Commission and Irene Borba, who are hosting a community meeting tomorrow evening at 5:30 p.m. This will be a remote Zoom meeting to review the housing element update document. Be aware that the public comment period ends on November 17th for this important document. So if you've not had a chance to get involved in the process, please visit the website blueprintforbelvedere.org and consider attending tomorrow's evening's meeting. On the topic of public meetings, as you're likely aware, the governor's emergency order allowing fully remote meetings expires in February. Over the last couple of months, our staff have been researching hybrid meeting options along with the equipment costs and personnel needed to operate this new feature. It led us to getting in contact with the Community Media Center of Marin. This is a JPA, or Joint Powers Authority organization, for which Belvedere is a member. The Community Media Center of Marin has experience in adapting several of our neighboring agencies' buildings over to support hybrid meeting setups. It's anticipated that there will be an annual cost to the city's budget, which will need to be considered. If this is a topic of interest to you, please consider attending our December council meeting for a discussion and consideration of this item. And that's all I have tonight. I know we have a busy meeting, so I'll conclude unless there's questions.
Does anybody have questions for Robert? Nope. Do we have anybody from the public wishing to make a
You
comment?
have William Rothman. Rothman
Okay.
is hand raised.
Dr. Rothman,
Yeah, thank you very much. You can hear me, I hope? Yes?
we can still hear you.
Thank you very much. I'm very glad that you're looking into the Zoom meeting, the hybrid meetings. I cannot tell you how important it is, and I speak as an elder in this community at this point, about how we older people may find it very difficult to attend meetings in person. Parents with the small children cannot come to the meetings in the evening. And although the Zoom is somewhat difficult to use, even I have found that I am able, as you see, to make use of it. It's a way to allow all of our residents, disabled, visually impaired, elderly, parents with young children, etc., to take part in our governing process, and not to do it when it's possible to do it and when other entities are doing it would really be terrible. So I urge you to serve the needs of all of the members of our community by allowing to have the continuation of the hybrid meetings. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Rothman. We'll look forward to seeing you by Zoom at our first hybrid meeting in December. So with that, do we have anybody else wishing Harrison to comment on Robert's?
No other raised hands, Mayor Wilkinson.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to item number 3, which is the presentation from Julia Elkin, who is a senior sea-level rise planner with the county. Julia, the floor is yours.
Good evening. Thank you so much to this council for the invitation to present to you all this evening. I'll be presenting on the new publicly available Marin Sea Level Rise Viewer. So my name is Julia Elkin. I'm a senior planner with Marin County Department of Public Works. And I'll note I'm joined this evening by my fantastic colleague, Lori Williams. Lori is a principal planner who leads our GIS and data team. Very importantly, it's Lori Williams who developed this viewer. So we're here together to answer any questions you may have. I understand this is a very short informational item, so I'm going to briefly cover 3 things. How and why the Sea Level Rise Viewer came to be, the unique value of this new viewer as opposed to the universe of other viewers that have existed over the years, and then a very quick peek at how it works. Always available for further questions this evening or at other times. So how it came to be. Over a year ago, the city of Sausalito, they developed an interactive sea level rise viewer specific to their jurisdiction and showed it to our Baywave Executive Steering Committee, which I believe this body may be familiar with, but that's comprised of local electeds from all our cities and towns in Marin, county staff, and public works staff from the cities and towns. And when that came to the Baywave Steering Committee, it really sparked interest. So our Baywave Executive Steering Committee directed county staff to develop a similar sea level rise viewer to offer a tool that could provide a look anywhere in the county at possible future sea level rise impacts. So this has been under development over the past year. We've done that through consultation with all of the cities and towns, through the planning directors group, the public works directors group, and the city managers group. And we're very happy that it's finally live and available to anyone in the public. And I'm just going to share my screen so you can see what I'm talking about as I tell you why we're excited about it. So let's just check the screen here. All right, and if you can see my screen now with a large map on it, is that showing for folks?
Yes.
Fantastic, thank you. So what's special about it? As I said in my opening, sea level rise viewers are not new. In fact, they've been around for over a decade, and we're fortunate in the Bay Area to have a lot of robust options. But what is new here is that this new viewer combines sea level rise scenarios, science-based sea level rise scenarios, with hyper local publicly available data sets. So that allows us to look at locations of our critical community infrastructure. You see down on the left as I'm moving my mouse, I don't want to make anyone dizzy, but there's data you can turn on here to look at key assets like our fire stations or sanitary treatment plants, stormwater pumps, and we can look at those anywhere in the county. And doing this, combining our sea level rise scenarios with what our physical realities are here in Marin, we hope it provides a transparent, sign-based tool to help local communities explore vulnerabilities to possible future sea level rise. And it lets us see the intersection of our different vulnerabilities on the ground. So that's both aspects of how our local communities function when waters rise, as well as how issues are actually shared across our local jurisdictional boundaries. We have things in common that we're needing to work through to face these challenges. So the county organized and is offering this tool. We hope it can provide a helpful foundation for transparent science-based analysis and supporting conversations at the local scale around our climate future. I'm just going to do one zoom. Forgive me for the, this is the part I feared. Just bringing us into Belvedere. This is an interactive viewer, which means it's dynamic scaling. You can zoom in on an area of interest. Here we are in Belvedere, just throwing on the city boundary so that we can really see where we're talking about, though I know you know your jurisdiction well. We can see different key assets of interest. There's also an integrated map on here of projects underway. So you can look at what's been happening in your jurisdiction. You can click on items for little pop-outs of information. I won't take you too deep into that right now, but I do want to emphasize all the data you can play with in here. None of it is new data. This is hosted within the Marin Map interface. So what we're populating with is publicly accessible data sets. The physical infrastructure, you can turn on parcel boundaries, use codes for buildings. I'm just going to bring us in on one of your shoreline areas and demonstrate. You could turn on parcels and be able to see discrete parcels. This is all existing publicly available data. And it is a sea level rise tool. So we have sea level rise scenarios. And again, I really want to emphasize these are not new scenarios. In fact, they are the precisely same scenarios as were used in the 2017 Baywave Marin vulnerability assessment for sea level rise. These are based on the USGS Cosmos data, United States Geological Survey. It's the same sea level rise data, just offered in the new interface to let us explore it against our local data. So in this example, I can turn on, I have a scenario on right now showing us a mid-century projection of 20 inches of sea level rise. You can also explore projections that layer on, say, a significant storm, like a 100-year storm. That storm that has a 1% chance of occurring in any given year. And you can see those different impacts for different possible scenarios. So that is a very brief introduction to what this tool is. There's obviously a lot of questions that get raised as you explore it. There's just a lot you can play with in here, dynamic scaling of the data. I'll note that we're excited to have it go public and we're excited for feedback. So we'll be listening, we'll be taking in feedback, and we do anticipate pulling that together and improving upon this. It's a living tool, so we will have updates in the future, but for these upcoming months, we would really like to receive any feedback and how people are using it. And I'm here now with Lori for any of your questions. Thank you so much.
Okay, I can't, This is going to be a bit complicated. I can't see council members, but
Oh, let me stop sharing my screen. I think that would help. We
I
can
think we might have
always-
some questions about it, so it's going to get complicated, but let's try. Council members, who has questions for Julia? Nancy.
This is not a question, but it's a comment. As you know, I'm this council's representative to the Bay Wave Steering Committee, where we meet with other jurisdictions in Marin and also our excellent county planner, which includes these two great women who've joined us tonight. This tool has been in the making for months and months, not because data was not available, but because it was this massive effort to pull all of the currently available data into one interactive map. And I really encourage everyone to access this from the county site and really zoom in, really play with it, work with it, and try to understand that the people dealing with sea level rise in Marin want to all be working from a transparent, publicly available, science-based set of data. And I, for one, am extremely grateful. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. James.
Thank you for the presentation. Of course, the difficulty with the internet and information is that there's so much out there. It's not always easy to find. I was just going to ask Robert and Harrison if perhaps you could include the link to this site in the next couple of town news blasts that we send out. I think it might be helpful for people to have another way of finding the site.
Thanks, James. Any other council members? No, I have just a couple of really quick questions because I like all of this data. One question was from the maps that you showed, when you show the flooding scenarios, can you then click in to see the depth of flooding? I didn't see that from what you showed there.
That's a great question, Mayor. And right now, no, it does not say depth. And in fact, that limitation in the existing USGS Cosmos sea level rise scenarios, that's a current piece they're working on for an update in the Bay Area. So a nice thing about this tool is as any underlying data set gets updated, we can incorporate those updates into the viewer. So at this time, we don't have depths because they're not part of the USGS modeling approach. But that is a feature that USGS is working on right now. They anticipated having it released in early 2023. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to offer that soon. Thank you.
Yeah, because for me, there are other data sets that show that, and I understand you're using this data set, but it is a really important piece because there's a big difference between 1 inch of flooding versus 4 feet of flooding. And so this doesn't mean very much without identifying those depths of flooding. So I would think that's an important addition. And just a quick comment, and I don't know whether you didn't show all the scenarios. I also think it's important just to show a 1% storm event today without sea level rise, because I think there's misinformation around that as well. And I think people should be aware that we're in a flood zone today with a 2% storm. And so I think those scenarios would be good to add in if that's possible as well as you develop.
That note, I neglected to mention there is a layer currently in there for the FEMA flood zone. So that gets at our 1% storm, but that's a great point. And perhaps we could draw that forward by offering more nuance in the way it's presented to say this is the 1% chance today. Really appreciate that note.
Perfect. Okay, with that, I will move over to see if there's any attendees wishing to make any comment on this.
Ken Johnson has his hand raised.
Okay, great. Bring Ken in. Good evening, Ken.
Mute. Thank you. I'm wondering if this information has been provided to our consultants for our housing units and the mandates from Sacramento. That was my first question.
Robert, is that something, or Irene, that you can touch on or not?
Yeah, I'd have to, that's a technical question. Irene, do you know the answer to that one?
I don't know the answer to that question. I'd be happy to follow up with our CEQA consultants for the housing element.
Okay, thanks, Irene. Ken, did you have anything else you wanted to comment on?
I just recommended it be done. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ken. Is there anybody else wishing to comment?
No other raised hands, Mayor Wilkinson.
Okay, great. In that case, enormous thanks to both Julia and Laurie for presenting this evening. It's a really important piece of work, and we all like to ignore the future. And so the more that we can educate, I think is really important. So the work you're doing is vital. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we will move on to what is now item number 4, which was item number 18, which is to receive an annual report on the city's measures to protect and improve Belvedere's parks, open spaces and lanes. And I believe we have Jenna Watson coming in to present for us. Oh, I see you right there. I'm sorry.
I'm on.
Evening, Jenna. How are you?
Hi, just fine, thanks, Mayor Wilkinson.
Good evening, Jenna. If let me quickly introduce you. Sorry to jump in there.
No, go for it, Tony.
I just wanted to quickly give an outline of what the report is and kind of how it fits in. So good evening, Mayor and council members, and apologies for my rude interruption here. I wanted to introduce Jenna, the chair of the Parks, Open Space and Lanes Committee. And she'll be delivering the report on the status of measures taken by the Parks, Open Spaces and Lanes Committee to address priorities during the preceding fiscal year. Under their new charter, this will be one of 2 reports to be delivered to City Council by the Parks, Open Spaces and Lanes Committee. The other being the annual recommendation on priorities for measures to improve or protect Belvedere's parks, open spaces and lanes. So with this being the first time one of these reports has been put together, feedback is definitely welcome. And and with that, I'll quickly, without any further ado, hand over to Jenna.
Tony.
All right. Tony, thank you very much for the introduction. And as Tony said, the Administrative Policy Manual of the city was amended in March of 2022 to make some changes to the administration of the committees, including the Parks, Open Spaces and Lanes Committee. And one of the additional requirements is that our committee deliver an annual report by the end of August every year to the City Council. So I want to give a huge shout out and thanks to Jean Borden and Anne Marie Walker for putting together our first report, literally building it from scratch. They delivered the report in August, sorry about that, on August 30th. What our report outlines is 12 different priority items, which are high priority, medium priority, and low priority. Some of the low priority items are those which have already been accomplished. So going forward, they may need maintenance or nothing at all. The high priority items, which should come as no surprise to all of us living in Belvedere, are handrail installation and repairs to the lanes, dead and dying trees on public and private land, obstructions of our gorgeous scenic views on both public and private lands, the effects of private projects on public lands, and the lanes initiative in general, which includes development of new lanes and some construction and improvements on existing lanes. Our medium priority items are vegetation and tree management on public lands, the Park Lane stair rebuild and potential seating area. This is really referring to the wooden stairs at the bottom of Park Lane. The lower Hawthorne stairs, which are in Centennial Park. This is also mostly dealing with the wooden stairs at the top of Centennial Park. The proposed new Artist View project is also medium priority. Low priority projects include the Lagoon Road plantings, the community playground, which as most of us know is almost completed, and code enforcement of violations of our vegetation and open spaces related code provisions in Belvedere. We've been working very hard with Robert and now with Tony since he's been here to try to move some of the projects forward, especially those in high priority. As most of us in Belvedere use the lanes and really appreciate our wealth of open spaces, including the lanes. That's one of the reasons why we have two different lane related initiatives on our high priority list. The entire report has been attached to the agenda so that any member of the public can see it as well. We will be delivering another report in December before the end of the year, talking about our progress on these various initiatives through the year. I'm happy to address any questions, comments, suggestions, etc. on our first report of the Parks and Open Spaces and Lanes Committee for Belvedere.
Thank you, Jenna. Okay, let me move this over to council. Who has questions or comments for Jenna? Peter.
Thank you, Jenna. Very helpful. You talk about, in particular for the lanes and not being a budget item this year. And I've also understood there to be some private funds raised or plan to be raised. Could you talk about that a little bit and your committee's thoughts on public and private funds?
Sure. For a prime example of some of the private funds that have been available for our lanes initiative is our new Golden Gate lane, which I have to say, if anyone wants a really good workout, you should run up our Golden Gate lane. That lane was constructed with a large majority of private funds. Brian Kemnitzer, who was my predecessor on the Parks and Open Spaces Committee, was primarily responsible for raising a lot of funds in order to get that lane constructed. The other way that we're trying to raise private funds, in addition to soliciting for new projects, is where there's construction on private property that abuts a lane, and that lane needs to be repaired, including as a condition for the private construction. The repair of the lane. For example, there's construction going on now on a house on Beach Road, where the stairs to the house actually go part of the way down the lane, and the homeowner is repairing farther down the lane as well. In terms of the budget item, we've been, and I'm sure Robert can talk about this better than I can, but we've been patching and repairing the lanes with general funds as repairs have become absolutely necessary. One of the reasons why I highlighted Park Lane and the wooden stairs at the bottom of Park Lane is, if anyone goes up them now, it will be a very different experience from when they went up them about a month ago, which was a little bit dicey. So I wanted to thank our public works team for repairing those, but it's just sort of getting patched right now. Everything is getting older and needs repairs almost constantly.
James.
Thank you, Jenna, and thanks to your committee, which I've had the great pleasure of being the city council representative on for 10 years and having served on back in the olden days. This is really, I guess, kind of a question for Irene. I noticed in the report that you're asking for some code enforcement for front hedges to be 6 feet tall, as is required in our code. And Irene, I'm curious because I sort of remember back in the day when the deer was a hot topic of discussion, that we heard from a lot of people that 6 feet was not adequate to keep the deer out. And indeed, I have seen them go over a 6-foot fence. And so I'm just wondering if that is in our code, if we might not revisit that with two thoughts. One is we have to be practical about how aggressive the deer have gotten here with the drought, trying to get to food. And secondly, on the island, I know, for example, that when you have a house above you and a house below you, that sometimes something a little bit more than a 6-foot hedge prevents you having direct sight lines into each other's house. Or in my house, for example, looking at a newly constructed garage and driveway. So I would be always looking at the underside of cars. So I just wonder if we might not take a look at that code. So, I mean, I don't think anyone wants to be breaking the law, so to speak, but I do think that sometimes one size fits all codes don't necessarily work. And I know on the other side that a lot of people are very upset when they walk by and they have lost a view because hedges are taller than they used to be or taller than they want them to be. Although I do think a 6-foot hedge keeps the view out of a probably half our population's view sight line anyway, because 6 feet is pretty tall. But anyway, just a thought as I'm departing from the council.
Thank you, Councilmember Campbell. Again, I think that is something that we can look at in the coming year and take a broader look at. You are correct. We did look at fencing for quite a while when we talked about deer fencing in particular. That was one of the discussion items, but I think you are correct. There could or should be some flexibility in the code for certain circumstances because of the topography of all the sites in Belvedere.
Right. And James, I wanted to highlight that the violations that our committee were primarily concerned with were illegal pruning of trees in Centennial Park, and then also building of unpermitted fences on public land. So it had to do with private actions on public land as opposed to private actions on private land.
Yeah, understood. And just to follow up on that, I know in the past we've been able to contract with code enforcement officers. I think we used Mill Valleys before when needed. I don't know, not my job to figure out what the workload we have in front of us is for a code enforcement officer, but as an alternative to a full-time or part-time employee, we could maybe look at contracting again for these specific issues you mentioned.
Thank you.
Thanks, James. I'm not sure who's next. Nancy?
I'm not sure I was next either, but this is a quick question. Because we have made some changes to the structure and the procedures within within your committee, Jenna, I'm really curious as to what the next steps are. This is a really fantastic report. I'm very grateful for it. It gives us a lot of good information and a lot of discussion points. What is the plan for implementing some of these items? Are you having an ongoing conversation with our excellent new Public Works Director and Irene and staff to further prioritize within these categories rather than, God forbid, having this excellent report end up in a drawer?
Right. As you may have noticed, there were a number of items that were on our most excellent report that have been proposed since as far back as 2015. But you know, a number of these are ongoing issues, and you know, and should be brought up every year. One of the changes that was made in the administrative policy manuals to give the Parks and Open Space Committee more of a dialogue with both the planning committee and also with Public Works, so that when there's private development that abuts or affects public land, Robert and now Tony have been reaching out to our committee, so that even though we only have 4 meetings per year, there is an ongoing dialogue, and I think there's actually more dialogue now than there was before. For example, last week, you know, we were asked to weigh in on the effect of a fence that was going to be built right next, or I guess proposed to be built right next to a lane. And I think that's a very positive move. With respect to the lanes initiatives, handrail installation and other lane repairs, we've also had an ongoing dialogue. Tony is reaching out to various contractors to see, for example, if we can try to do all of the cement work together or the handrail work together to try to mitigate costs of the repairs that we really need. Similarly, with respect to vegetation and tree management, where there's other tree management going on, trying to make sure that we take advantage of resources when they're actually on Belvedere to try to get bundle some smaller projects together to make them more cost effective. So, it remains to be seen whether our reduced numbers and our reduced meetings works just as well. But so far, it's been very good.
Thank you. That was a really great response. And I particularly like that you've given some forethought to the benefit of efficiencies of scale, because this report now gives a better idea of what is happening throughout the community. So really pleased. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nancy.
Jim, did your hand go down?
I did have my hand up. Yeah, as usual, thank you, Mayor. As usual, my colleagues have raised many of the questions that were on my mind, so I can abbreviate this. Jenna, first, thank you so much for your service on the committee and for chairing it and for this excellent report. I do think it's very helpful, and I want to echo Councilmember Kemnitzer's point that this is such an important document that we should do all that we can to make sure that it has life and doesn't sort of land up in a drawer. One question I had for you, and this picks up on the discussion you had with Councilmember Campbell about the hedges and so forth that are on public land. You said that the committee was focused on sort of private development of hedges on public land. And I guess my question for you is, has the committee identified addresses or properties or areas where this is occurring? And I ask only because there are so many properties in town that include public land with fences and hedges and so forth on public land. So it seems like it's more common than exceptional. And so is there a list of those things, or are we working towards that? Thank you.
We don't have a list. It's been sort of coming up as either building permits have been requested, or other actions have been requested to be taken, or quite frankly, one of our committee members or another member of the public brings something to our attention. The example that really sort of brought it to a head was there was a private citizen who topped some of the trees in Centennial Park, and caused at least one of the trees to die. So that's sort of a far left example of what I'm talking about. But one of the ways when our committee has been brought into private actions on public land is there's a number of houses on Beach Road that are they're in the process of being renovated. And building new docks. One of the things that we've been trying to preserve is the ability for the public to walk along the shoreline, because the shoreline is open space, especially because we're on an island. There's not that many ways that you can actually enjoy the water. And I think it's one of the remarkable things about where we live is our proximity to water. So we've been trying to work with both Irene and her staff, and also with the homeowners to find a way of giving them the ability to build the dock that they want or rebuild the dock that they want, while preserving for the public the right to walk along the water. So
thank you, Jenna. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
James.
I just wanted to follow up on the importance of this report, and hopefully the intention of it is, once again, thank you. But I think it's important to have this forum for the public and the City Council to see all the hard work that our citizen volunteer Parks and Open Space Committee does throughout the year. And it also gives us a sense of, you know, the goals that the committee is trying to achieve when we come around to our budget discussions. So I think it's an important report, and it might end up in a drawer at some point, but not before it's proven very useful. So thank you, all of you.
Thanks, James. I just want to make one additional comment because I agree entirely. So thank you to Steve Block for making these changes in terms of these citizen committees. I feel like this is a really significant improvement, and it's the first time I've really seen a sort of global picture of what you're trying to achieve. The one piece for me that's missing is how that fits in with the budget line item and the sort of history of parks and open space budget. How much is privately funded, how much is publicly funded. And I think going forward, that would certainly be a useful component, because it's very useful to know what your wish list is. But if we don't have any context for that in terms of the history, it only provides sort of part of the puzzle, not all of it. So I'd encourage that to be in some way brought in. Maybe it's separately produced through Helga, but I think that would be a useful addition.
Thank you. Thank you. And I actually think that will be very useful as well. I know that Robert did a lot of work working with both our committee and also with the finance committee to try to sort of mesh the two. And you know, once again, Brian Chemnitzer was a prodigious fundraiser, both for the playground and also for various lanes initiatives and other items that in most places would be considered public works. So I think there is a very important aspect of private funding, especially for the larger initiatives that our committee is trying to tackle. One of the reasons why we've put Artist View as medium priority and not high priority is because of the recognized need for fundraising that is not going to be provided by the city in order to have that initiative consummated.
Okay, thanks, Jenna. Unless we have further questions from City Council, we'll move to public comment. Harrison, could you bring in, I think, Dr. Rothman to make a comment?
Yeah, we have William Rothman.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much. Several months ago, at the Parks and Open Space Committee, a question was raised with respect to monies that had been promised, guaranteed, whatever you want to call, out of the budget that was supposed to go each year for building up money to improve the lanes. And Robert explained, well, sorry, we can't do that, because the money is going for the, I guess at that time it was Protect Belvedere Project, whatever the iteration of the name was at that time. I really feel, particularly since the Measure D didn't pass, and you're not going to have a giant general fund, that the parks and open space and the lanes will not be treated as a stepchild. And that you will, I hope you will, eliminate the additional expense for this so-called Protect project, now that there's no Measure D and no Charter City, and get back to fundamentals such as guaranteeing that money for these very worthy lane projects, view projects, etc., will become, again, guaranteed money. Thank you very much for your attention.
Is there any other public comment? I thought I saw somebody else's hand raised.
I think they must have lowered their hand. No other raised hands.
Okay, in that case, I think we will end this item. Jenna, thank you so much to you and to everybody on your committee for the incredible work that you do here. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Mayor Wilkinson and City Council.
Thanks so much. Okay, so we're going to move forward to the consent items. Quick question for Amy. Can I continue with the, so as to not confuse people, can we continue with the existing numbering, or does everything have to get renumbered?
you can continue with the existing numbering.
Fine. In that case, we're going to move to the consent calendar. The consent calendar consists of items that the City Council considers to be routine or council has discussed previously and do not require further discussion. Unless any item is specifically removed by any member of the City Council staff or the public, the consent calendar will be adopted by one motion. Items removed will be considered in the sequence as they appear below. If any member of the public wishes to have an item removed, please raise your hand when called and indicate the item. So I would first like to ask whether any member of the City Council would like to remove any items currently on the consent calendar. Nancy.
Number 10, please.
Number 10.
Beach-
Okay.
312 Beach Road. Thank
Okay.
you.
Anybody else wishing to City Council? No. Any member of staff wishing to remove any item? Nope. Any member of the public wishing to remove an item? Harrison.
No raised hands, Mayor Wilkinson.
In that case, so could I get a motion to approve items 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11, and 12?
I move to adopt the consent calendar minus item 10.
Perfect. Can I get a second?
Second.
Perfect. And can I get a roll call?
Sure. Councilmember Campbell,
Aye.
Councilmember Chemnitzer,
Aye.
Councilmember Lynch,
Yes.
Councilmember Mark, and Mayor Wilkinson.
Yes. Perfect. Okay, so let's move back to item number 10. Nancy, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. When I read the staff report and looked into the and studied the Planning Commission meetings that gave rise to this item at tonight's council meeting, I really thought it needed a little bit more discussion. The location is 312 Beach. The proposed landscape, and I'm more concerned, I have a little bit to say about the street revocable license, but I'm mainly concerned about what's referred to as the rear of the property, which is re-landscaping areas on the city property. And I'll make a few factual statements and invite Irene to correct me, because if I misunderstand any part of it, I certainly want to make sure I understand what the situation is. So it looks to me that the applicant removed a lot of landscaping on city property without approval or the benefit of design review or the city's consent, and that this particular area that is that goes down to that beach that Jenna Watson was speaking of earlier, it appears to be a pretty unstable slope and quite steep. So my first question of staff would be, were penalties imposed for this? And really kind of what the discussion was like around remediating the destruction of the city property at that point. Looking at streets, at the streetscape, and really this is not the main part of my concern, but it looks like the materials presented to us tonight in terms of the elevations do not at all match the landscape plan that was approved. So I think we need some clarity as to the date of the landscape plans that this revocable license would pertain to. I believe those are dated June 22nd, 2022, but I feel that we need some clarity. When I did a site visit, it looks like some things have been replanted at this street, but they do not appear to be thriving. Getting back to the city property at the rear of the 312 Beach. The staff report reports this came before the Planning Commission in September and October. I did review the staff report for the September meeting, and very interesting history of the various revocable licenses that have been approved on this property. I think what we're doing tonight really requires that we're absolutely clear about what tonight's action would do with respect to two previous revocable licenses that have been approved pertaining to that area. One is 1978, and one is 2018. The 2018 revocable license seems to be the easier one. According to the staff report, and I just want to make sure I understand this, that the approved revocable license in 2018 lapsed or expired when the project expired. So in short, the 2018 revocable license does not pertain to tonight's request for a revocable license, and that that no longer exists. The 1978 revocable license seems a bit more complicated, and I'm unclear what that involves. One aspect of the previous staff report, or perhaps this staff report, actually it may be tonight's staff report, indicates that not only did the applicant remove brush and trees and landscaping on city property without approval, but removed some steps, and that no steps are being proposed in the request for approval tonight. This really needs some clarification because the 1978 revocable license relates to access to a dock which is shared between the owner of 312 and 310. This is I think there are one or two others, but it is unusual. So in order to clean this up, without continuing it, because I know winter's upon us and we want to get that slope vegetation planted as soon as possible, I would propose that the license be amended in the prefatory material to state, pursuant to my above comments, language such as this. If you look at that introductory paragraph, the two introductory paragraphs, I would propose that if this is accurate, and I need some verification, that the above, quote, the above described improvements as set forth in plans dated June 22nd, 2022, received city design approval on or about October 18th. It might be the September meeting, so correct me there if I'm wrong, which do not include steps, retaining walls, fences, or hardscape of any kind, unquote. I think that would clarify, and again, this is subject to our city attorney's review, but it seems to me that that would clarify the revocable license, which then proceeds to have the usual boilerplate, such as paragraphs that refer to hardscape or vertical structure that do not exist. And I would be prepared to move to approve this, but only with those clarifications. I know this has gone on a bit long, but why do I think this is important? So this particular applicant could very well sell the property now or in the future. And when the property is sold, I think it's important, given the history of what's gone on here, that the buyer understand the situation. I know it's not usually set forth with this specificity, but I feel that in this case, it's the only way to protect the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. This sounds like a complicated, too complicated an issue to bring on consent. And so, Nancy, I sense that staff might have to go back and do some work on this. Do you have any objection to it being continued for a month?
I don't. I know, having looked at the comments in the Planning Commission, I believe, I think there is some, and just intuitively, I think there is some concern about protecting that slope. I also, perhaps Irene can address this. I think some mitigating measures have been put in place. I would really defer to Irene as to whether we can afford to do that, or whether the city property is in danger. But it is
okay. So Irene or Robert, could one of you address as best as you can whether we should continue this, or you can address Nancy's concerns?
In terms of the slope stability, Mayor Wilkinson, from what I understand, and Brian Van Son, our building official, is on, but Brian required erosion control measures to be put in place, cotton netting, wattles and things of that nature. So my understanding is that those have all been put in place according to the requirements of the building department. So I'm not aware of any concerns regarding the slope. I think the additional plantings which were approved by the Planning Commission at the October Planning Commission meeting will help to, again, strengthen that hillside a little bit more by getting some vegetation put in. The landscaping plan for the private property itself of 310 Beach and for the city property were also approved through MMWD, and that is the landscaping plan with some minor modifications that the Planning Commission approved at the October Planning Commission meeting. In terms of the revocable license, the one from 2018 actually was never fully executed. It was never signed and brought through the process that it needed to go through. That was also for another project for that property, which was supposed to be a demolition of the existing house and a new home. That project did not take place. The property owner then decided to do a remodel of the existing home and the garage, as well as a complete landscaping plan for the property. So again, the 2018 one did not come to fruition. It was never fully executed. My understanding is from reviewing the records in terms of the revocable licenses for the dock. From what I recall, that revocable license was actually replaced some years ago with a dock lease for a shared dock between the two property owners, between 312 Beach and 310 Beach. Recently, the Planning Commission also approved a set of stairs on the property of 310 Beach so that he can access the dock, because the two parties do not want to any longer share in stairs to access the dock. So 310 Beach did get approval a few months ago to do a set of stairs down to the dock. At this point, the property owner 312 Beach has no intention of putting any stairs in to access the dock. And again, he has been told that if he needed to go through any process for stairs in the future, he would have to go through design review and possibly again revise the revocable license should this get approved through the council. I think one of the other questions Councilman Chemnitzer had asked about was the fines for doing work without approvals penalties. Our code was changed some time ago to not require penalties on work done without approvals, there is what we call an additional fine or fee when they submit, which is $500, which that was paid, but there are no additional penalties imposed because the code was changed. I'm not sure if I answered all your questions, but.
Nancy, were your questions answered? Were your questions all answered?
The questions were answered, and although I did, although my presentation was, my concerns were a little long-winded, and I apologize for that. I believe it's now pretty simple, and if we could add the language I suggested, I would be in a position to approve it.
Okay, I see Peter's got his hand raised. Do you want to make a comment, Peter?
Yeah, thank you. Just really quick, Councilor Clements, I see your point about clarity here, given the history of the property. Going back to my experience in the Planning Commission, we experienced the same application as well. But it seems to me, and Irene, if you could comment on this, it seems that the application is pretty clear about the iteration schedule and the Planning Commission's approval of this project as of 9/20, meaning the date of the plans, 9/27 to 9/30 in their October meeting. I think it shows pretty clearly what they can and can't do. I would agree with Nancy that if we could add it, it's a belt and suspenders type of protection for the city. But it seems like it's pretty well in order as far as what they would do and what they can and can't do. So if you and Robert think that's and Amy think that's a reasonable addition to the language, I would concur with Councilmember Kivitzer that it could be approved with that being added simply.
I'd be happy to do that.
Okay, and Amy, is there any issue with what we're discussing here?
Well, the only issue I see is whether the owner of the property who's agreeing to this license, who hasn't seen the amended language, I think council could amend the revocable, it's hard to say, license, and approve it subject to the owner's consent, because, generally we do present the final document to the owner since they also sign on to it.
Okay, so Nancy, can I ask you to make the motion exactly as you would like it, please?
Sure. I move that we approve the revocable license for 312 Beach Roads as presented in the staff report tonight, subject to the following amendment in the introduction. Do you want me to read the existing? I'm sorry, let me locate it exactly, and then I won't have to read it. Oops. Okay. In the prefatory paragraph, beginning the above described improvements, I propose that sentence be amended as follows. The above described improvements as set forth in plans dated June 22nd, 2022 received city design approval on or about October 18th, 2022, which do not include steps, retaining walls, fences, or hardscape of any kind, close quote, and the remainder of the revocable license remain intact.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
Second, Campbell.
And a roll call, please.
Sure. Councilmember Campbell.
Aye.
Councilmember Kivitzer.
Aye.
Councilmember Lynch.
Yes.
Councilmember Mark.
Aye.
And Mayor Wilkinson.
Yes, motion passes. And Nancy, thank you very much for digging in so deeply into all of those materials. Much appreciated. Okay, let's move on to our first item in terms of public hearings. This is item number 13, introduction and first reading of ordinance number 2022-07, repealing the contents of chapter 16.04, construction codes, and adopting a new chapter 16.04, adopting by reference the 2022 edition of the California Code of, oh my gosh, it goes on, of regulation. Title 24, building codes with modifications to meet the local, C, climatic, geological, or T, topographical, C, conditions and findings. Gosh, that adoption of the ordinance is exempt from CEQA pursuant to CEQA guidelines. That made no sense to me. I will ask for a staff report.
All right, Mayor Wilkinson, thank you, fellow council members. This is the standard building code adoption throughout the state of California. It is happening all over the state as we speak. The state of California updates its building codes on a triennial basis, or every 3 years. We last updated them in 2019. It is that time again, and we are going to adopt the 2022 California building codes. We will adopt all codes within Title 24 Code of Regulations except the fire code, and that'll be presented by Fire Marshal Mike Lantier following my presentation tonight. This is the first reading. There will be a second reading in December, and the codes will become effective in January if approved. There are no real major changes in the new code. The state is moving toward a more greener, energy efficient state. It now requires solar systems be installed on all new residences. However, it does not require the electrification of new buildings. Staff recommends that City Council adopt a motion to approve the first reading of the ordinance, and additionally adopt a motion to schedule a public hearing or the second reading and a final adoption of the ordinance at the December 12th, 2022 council meeting. Staff is now open for questions.
Do any members of the City Council have questions or comments? Nope.
No, I do. Brian, you know this is coming. A couple of things, and let me ask you: do you want specific comments on this at this time, or is it something I should do offline? I mean, I've got some pretty particular things.
That would be up to you, Councilmember Mark.
Well, just real quick. Under section work exempt from permit, fences 7 feet or lower. That's something we've talked about as well. As far as I think there needs to be a design review perspective on that, because 6 to 7 is a condition element, I believe, of fences. So it's inconsistent seemingly to have that exempt from permit work.
It is exempt from building permit work. It is not exempt from planning department or design review approvals.
Okay. You all in the sprinkler section, which I'm sure the fire marshal might get to as well. There seems to be some inconsistency about, except for single family dwellings in attics that require sprinklers, and seems also in conflict with the next paragraph that unoccupied spaces need to be sprinkled. So I would just look at that. It seems a bit where we call out specific references and to the comment later on with the fire marshal. His document goes into that quite significantly, and this isn't as consistent with it as it probably should be.
Understood. And we would defer to the more restrictive code, which would be the fire marshal's code, but we would be happy to amend that section so that we're more congruent with Tiburon Fire Protection District.
Because we pull it out specifically from the broader code, and I would just make sure it's consistent with item, down the line with what the fire marshal will say also.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I've got a couple more, but I'll get you more specific things after the fact. A couple.
Not a problem. Be happy to work with you on that.
But thank you.
We will require a third reading of the ordinance.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none. So Amy, there's no motion to make on this. It's just a first read. This is just a first reading in any case, correct?
We move to introduce the ordinance.
I'll move to
It's
introduce
been
the,
with- Sorry, go ahead, James.
I'll move to introduce the ordinance. And is there a second motion to, no, okay. I'll move to introduce the ordinance.
Second, Chemnitzer.
Can I get Amy, I'm going to back up here because I'm very confused at this point because there seems to be a recommendation for also to schedule a public hearing, second reading and final adoption. But you're saying with the changes that Peter is now making that we'll have to defer this by a month. I'm confused.
If you're planning on making amendments to the code, we are going to have to set it for another hearing. The motion adoption of these codes by reference are slightly different from our normal practices. The hearing is actually, technically, the public hearing is required on the second reading. So generally, you just move to introduce and set a public hearing, which you can do as one motion. Here, however, if there's going to be amendments to the building code, it means that as an ordinance, it's going to require 2 more hearings. So you can move to introduce, but we'll introduce in the amended one next time.
Okay, fine. So I think your motion was appropriate as stated, correct? And so in that case, can I just get a roll call?
Sure. Councilmember Campbell.
Aye.
Councilmember Chemnitzer.
Aye.
Councilmember Lynch.
Yes.
Councilmember Mark.
Yes.
Mayor Wilkinson.
Yes, motion passes. I refuse to read item number 14, Mike. Item number 14, I think we will go over to, I'm going to simplify as introduction and first reading of ordinance number 2022-08. Do we have a staff report or does this go straight over to Mike?
No, I think we're going to send it over to Mike. He's got an introduction for this item.
Okay, thank you so much. Evening.
Yes, thank you, Honorable Council and distinguished city staff. Thanks for having me. I seek your ratification of Ordinance 131 of the Tiburon Fire Protection District, adoption of the 2022 California Fire Code. This process for us as a county fire prevention officers group, we spend about 6 to 7 weeks meeting almost twice a week to make sure we could be as close to each other as possible. Now, us being in the southern part of Marin versus the northern part of Marin or western Marin, there are some climatic and topographic uniqueness, but generally speaking, we all came to consensus because that's kind of what we've heard is that we don't want to have a contractor working up in Nevada who comes down to our area and says, well, this is what they do there. Why do you guys make it different? We all want it to be the same. And so generally speaking, this ordinance is relatively the same as what we did 3 years ago with Ordinance 129. But a few things obviously have progressed in the state. Obviously, very much wildfire is on everyone's mind. The best part of this ordinance is that the city of Belvidere is not recognized as a wildland urban interface by the Tiburon Fire District. So none of Chapter 49 is applicable, which is fantastic because it's getting harder and harder to do things in California in this wildland urban interface. But generally speaking, this is a pretty tight document. We do have some uniqueness in referring to Councilmember Mark's comments about sprinklers. Tiburon, if you don't know, way back in 1983 was, I think, the second or third community in the state of California to adopt sprinklers. And so we're very aggressive about those. We actually take Chapter 9 and completely rewrite it, which is referenced in this ordinance as well. And I will take, obviously, Councilmember's question, Mark's question after this. But generally, we're just looking at the same stuff. We're trying to make it more concise. So, an all-weather surface versus a driveway had to be defined. It was not defined in the fire code in previous editions. And so we're trying to do that. The interesting exterior wildfire protection systems. These are rooftop sprinkler systems that have now come on the market in California. And they do provide a service to embers. Obviously, they're wetting the roof for ember cast. unfortunately, there's no standard on this. And so what worries us as fire code officials is that if these are to be remote activated and you're talking about 25 gallons per minute over a course of 100 and some odd homes, that's a significant loss of volume and water to our existing system. So we went ahead as a Marin group and started to put in some construction permitting and some guidelines. And Marin has always done this. We've been very out in front of things. Sprinklers being one, vegetation management being another. We're ahead of the game because we're taking it very seriously. So obviously this is a long document, but it really is the same as what we did 3 years ago. And with that, I will just offer up questions. Anyone have any questions for me?
I do want to just procedurally let the council know that you're actually going to be taking 2 actions tonight in reference to the fire code. You will be introducing and moving to public hearing on actually adopting the fire code into Belvedere Municipal Code. You're also required as a city within a fire district, you're required under the Health and Safety Code to adopt a resolution ratifying the Tiburon Fire District Ordinance. And then the city is required to send the resolution ratifying it and the Tiburon Fire District Ordinance adopting the fire code to Department of Housing and Community Development. So you'll see 2 agenda items in relation to the fire code. And this is the triennial adoption of the fire code. Every community is required to adopt the state fire code, but is allowed to adopt some more stringent conditions than the state, provided that it is based on local climatic, geographical, and topical condition. So those are the 2 actions that you'll be doing tonight.
Thank you for that, Amy. Okay, so let me ask council members whether they have questions. Seeing none. Mike, I have a really 101 question, which is, will there ever be a time when Belvedere might fall into the definition of a WUI, or that is sort of strictly defined or is moving?
The approach that we took back in, I think it was 2007, 2008. I was not obviously with the district at the time, but Fire Marshal Ron Barney was very perplexed about how the state was overlaying wildland urban interface because it was new. It was a new concept, but the idea was that Belvedere, being as established as you are, what, 1896? Is that when you were founded? Is that right? Anyhow, it's been a long time. So yeah, I was a history major. So, but we were concerned that being that Belvedere is what it is, it would be disastrous to try to use the wildland urban interface concepts of defensible space when we've got such a density that is beautiful and we can obviously defend and maintain. But as time goes on, there's a thing about to happen next year called the 0 to 5 foot non-combustible zone 0, meaning nothing can grow between the house and within 5 feet of the structure. And that would be tough with people who live in Belvedere, love the trees. They love living amongst the beauty of that landscape. So we felt it was not a good idea for us to include Belvedere, and we still believe that right now. So unless council comes to us and says we would like to look at this and study this, then obviously we would consider it.
Okay, thank you for that, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see, are there any members of the public with wanting to make public comment on this issue? Harrison.
No raised hands, Mayor Wilkinson.
Okay, so Amy, just to be clear, what we're asked, so this is related to both items 14 and 15 combined, correct? And we're asking for 2 things here. Correct me if I'm wrong, which is a motion to introduce and approve the first reading of the ordinance and schedule a public hearing for final reading of the ordinance to state law on December 12th, 2022. Is that correct? That's the first motion. And the second is adopt the resolution ratifying the the fire codes of the Tiburon Fire Protection District.
That is
Yes.
correct, Mayor.
Could somebody make that motion?
Is it a single motion or the two separate motions, Amy?
We should probably do them as separate. Let's introduce the ordinance and then let's adopt the resolution.
All right.
Could
I
you
will make the first motion, Mayor
Thank
Wilkinson.
you. Could I get a second?
Second.
Can I get a roll call, please?
Sure. Councilmember Campbell,
Aye.
Councilmember Chemnitzer,
Aye.
Councilmember Lynch,
Yes.
Councilmember Mark,
Yes.
and Mayor Wilkinson.
Yes. And can I get somebody to make a motion to adopt a resolution ratifying the fire codes of the Tiburon Fire Protection District?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Could I get a second?
Second.
Councilmember
Roll
Campbell,
call, please.
Aye.
thank you. Councilmember Chemnitzer,
Aye.
Councilmember Lynch,
Yes.
Councilmember Mark,
Yes.
and Mayor Wilkinson.
Yes. Okay, we are now moving on to item number 16. Introduction and first reading of ordinance number 2022-09 of the City of Belvedere, amending Chapter 2.08 of Title 2 of the Belvedere Municipal Code. Could I please get a staff report?
Sure, I'll go ahead and kick off this staff report, Mayor Wilkinson. Very briefly, as I mentioned earlier in the city manager's report, the city intends to start the process of transitioning to hybrid meetings in December and January. To accomplish this, we anticipated that some reordering of the meeting agenda may be part of that process. While researching some of those changes, our city attorney has identified a few locations in our Belvedere Municipal Code that are outdated, specifically how the city council's meeting operations maintain compliance with the Brown Act, references to Robert's Rules of Order, and other procedural references to the public meeting. Amy, I'll go ahead and kick that over to you if you want to add some more detail on those.
Right, and I think I reviewed the council rules and the administrative procedure manual, and they're a little bit. I think we can streamline them and update them to make they're a little easier to follow and to assure they're up to date with the law and give council a little easier flexibility around the order of business. So we can amend the administrative policy manual at one meeting, but amending our ordinances takes two. So this is a little bit of the introduction and preview. The municipal code, as it currently stands, repeats sections of the Brown Act, but not all sections of the Brown Act. The Brown legislature is amending the Brown Act constantly. So it just makes sense to take these repetitive provisions out of the municipal code. We're subject to the Brown Act regardless of what's in our municipal code. And then hopefully at the next meeting, we'll be able to bring some more some rules that are a little bit more up to date, easier to follow. I think your current rules have 2 pages on motions that very few people other than General Robert himself understand. So the goal is to make these meetings a little more efficient and a little more user-friendly for everyone who participates, council as well as staff and members of the public.
Thank you for that, Robert and Amy. Do council members have any questions? Yes, Peter.
Just real quick, Amy, it seems that I understand what you're doing. You're saying that other meetings should be consistent with the provisions of the Brown Act. While certainly true, aren't all meetings consistent with the Brown Act? And don't we don't say that anywhere up front either. Shouldn't we say that more specifically?
I think perhaps I didn't explain myself well, because yes, all meetings of legislative bodies of local agencies as defined in the state law, the Brown Act, are subject to the Brown Act, regardless of whether you put it in your municipal code or you don't put it in your municipal code. So yes, you are subject because state law says you're subject. So we don't need to repeat that in the municipal code. What we'll try to do in the rules is to focus on those things that are not in the Brown Act, but allow you to have efficient and effective meetings. So while the Brown Act covers a lot of stuff, there are some stuff that it doesn't cover, like your order of business. And there are you can set by rule certain provisions related to public comment. We need to update that a little because we have a new state law on that. So that's our goal, is to update. My preference is to not mirror provisions of the Brown Act in the municipal code because first of all, it doesn't matter what your municipal code says because state law prevails in this instance that preempts local law. But second, when the legislature updates, that means you're required to go back and update to make sure every word is parallel.
So, no, certainly I understand. It just seemed odd that you're even putting in that sentence about other meetings because that seems to be covered by the underlying 54950 anyway.
The Brown Act does require a legislative body to set its regular meetings at a location and a date and a time. And so we are stating here that council is setting the meetings and is going to set it in their resolutions. We could take that out entirely if you want.
No, I understand.
But that is actually, while the Brown Act requires you to set a regular time and place, it doesn't tell you what that regular time and place is. So that is something that we need to do.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting we take that out. It just, I understand that you're taking out 4 or 5 paragraphs that are duplicative of what the broader state law says. So it just seems strange that you would even put that last sentence in about other meetings, because obviously that's already contemplated by the Brown Act ordinances anyway.
So what I'm hearing,
It just seemed unnecessary.
You'd like to amend it and take that sentence out, which is fine.
It just seemed if you're already making it simplified, that doesn't seem to add much, other than it seems to be a placeholder for the 4 paragraphs that used to be there, which is already contemplated by the ordinance. Meaning not the ordinance, but the government code section 54950. It's not a big deal. It just seemed an extra step.
Okay, we can, I mean, if you'd like to move to
It's
introduce the
not
ordinance.
necessary, and I don't want to add an additional reading to this.
Well, that probably wouldn't add a reading, but it's your call.
I was just trying to understand, and I appreciate what you said.
Okay, thank you for that, Peter. Do we have any other council members wishing to make comment or have questions? No. Are there any members of the public? I don't see any. Harrison?
No raised hands, Mayor Wilkinson.
Okay. Okay, with that, Amy, what is the motion that we're looking for here?
Sorry, I was muted. Introduce the ordinance and continue for a second reading.
Okay, perfect. So can I get a motion to introduce and approve the first reading?
I'll make the motion, Lynch.
Can I get a second?
Campbell.
And can I get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Campbell.
Aye.
Councilmember Chemnitzer.
Aye.
Councilmember Lynch.
Yes.
Councilmember Mark.
Yes.
Mayor Wilkinson.
Yes, motion passes, and I look forward to the more meaty content that will come next month about such items that we've discussed in terms of ordering of business, etc. Okay, we are moving on to item number 17. Adopt resolution number 2022-56, amending the master schedule of fees by modifying the fees for road closures, encroachment permits, and other fees. Could I get the staff report? Who will this be from, Robert?
That's from me tonight, Mayor Wilkinson. Thank you for that introduction. The Construction Impacts Committee was established in early 2022 to analyze reports of increased traffic congestion and large construction projects in Belvedere. They met over the spring and summer of 2022 and focused primarily on how thoughtful management of public and private construction work in Belvedere could be improved to ultimately alleviate a variety of construction-related complaints. Through a collaborative process involving residents, staff, and contractors, that committee submitted a report to council with their findings and recommendations this summer. These recommendations range from topics such as how design review applications are evaluated to job site parking, permits, and even how complaints are processed internally through City Hall. The changes to the master fee schedule, as described in the staff report, are also recommendations from the committee that are intended to encourage better use of the road closure and encroachment permit options available to contractors, while at the same time bringing our fees closer in line with that of other jurisdictions charging for similar services. The committee proposed a handful of other fee changes which are likely to require professional fee study before implementation. Staff is working with our current contract engineer to select a professional firm to undertake that work. That concludes my report. If there's questions, I'm happy to take those now.
Do any council members have questions? Jim.
Robert, I had one quick question. I think that the PDF that is attached to the report, which is the revised master schedule of fees, may have a oversight or a typo in it because it does not reflect a change in the 1 week encroachment permit fee. If you look at
I'm seeing that as well.
The last segment on page 2 there.
I'll have to review the summary from the committee and find out if they had a recommendation. I want to say that there may not have been one. It was a change in the 1-day permit. And then a change in the 4-hour. Actually, you're right. That's correct. Hold on one second.
I thought the report mentioned that there would be an increase in that fee from 105 to 650 or something like that.
It did. You're correct. So the week-long permit fee is being changed from 105 to 650. The attached document needs to be updated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
James.
Thanks, Robert. The delivery fee how does that compare? The $250 delivery fee, how does that compare with other jurisdictions in Marin?
Which one specifically?
The encroachment fee for deliveries? It's $260.
Right. You're referring to the full day encroachment permit fee?
Oh, that's the full day. Okay. Yes. So is there one, say someone's getting a couch dropped off or a refrigerator, is there a fee for that? And can you remind me what it is?
So the committee recommended in implementing what they would call a delivery fee or a short-term fee, which would be $53. It was meant to more or less bridge the gap between a full day encroachment permit and a week-long permit and make something more affordable so that we could still capture those encroachments that were happening. That is one of those items that we believe is going to need a fee study, believe it or not. And we're looking into that. It would be coming down the pike.
Thanks for that clarification.
Sure.
Peter.
Yeah, Robert, we talked about that as well offline, and I would hesitate to put this schedule in place. I know you've got some time without that delivery only short-term encroachment fee in place, because we don't, as one thing we talked about in our committee, is not having these fees so high and expenses for a simple delivery that contractors would be motivated not to apply, not to get it permitted and just try to get away with it. So I would, whether a fee study needs to happen or not, figure that out and then get that short-term delivery only type encroachment in place as soon as possible.
I'm going to step in here. This short-term delivery fee was raised by Robert last Friday. I think there's some substantial legal questions about this fee as the state regulates commercial trucks and by weight, and the state assesses this. So I think it may not require so much a fee study as further legal analysis. I think there are also some practical considerations that I'm not sure the city has worked out in terms of how this is actually implemented and enforced. Just as a practical consideration, how does the city know you're getting a couch delivered? I mean, I think there's some questions here. But
Well, it was our understanding from the, I'm sorry, Amy, from the, in our Construction Impact Committee, it's not so much individuals having a delivery personally, it's permitted work that is having a 20-minute, 30-minute delivery of timber or a window delivery that wouldn't require a half day or a full day, let alone a week, broader encroachment permit, but they're still utilizing and making use of the city's right of way. So trying to capture that in a smaller permit than the full 260 that's contemplated. Is that right, Robert?
Yeah, I think that's accurate. I think the question right now is, do we have enough information, or I'd say, do we have enough leeway in the way we're adopting this to be able to adopt it as presented tonight, but make changes later on with flexibility in terms of when this change is implemented? And Amy, I think that's a question for you. Can it be adopted tonight, or should this be continued until we have a decision on the short term or the delivery fee, whatever we want to call that?
well, council has the option to either adopt the resolution as is, continue the matter, or give direction to staff to return at a later date with further information.
Can I just ask, I know there are a lot of issues here, but in terms of a fee study, which I know you want to implement, can you give some idea of how long those take? Because that might help sort of frame what we're doing here.
Yeah, I can comment on that. So I worked on a fee study for encroachment permits specifically related to road impact while I was in Mill Valley. That fee study rather took approximately 3 months from once we hired the contractor for them to generate. Again, that's a more complex organization. I would think that could be sped up a little bit for Belvedere. But we're looking at anywhere, I'd say, between 45 to 60 days for something like that. And of course, getting it on the agenda to get adopted, it would be sometime early in 2023.
Okay, and so that, to be clear, the advantage of adopting this sort of partial solution right now is to achieve behavioral impacts, or what are we looking to do by bringing this piece forward before the rest of it? And maybe Peter might have more of a thought on that.
Yeah, this was never a revenue goal of the city. The goal from the Construction Impact Committee was to have contractors and homeowners who have projects on their house think more clearly about how they're scheduling road closures, encroachments, and so forth to impact the community less. And if you put a higher fee on it, their contractor would, in theory, be able to, would be motivated to think that through more specifically, group deliveries together, group activities together, so that they wouldn't have to have multiple days at a higher rate. We did recognize, though, that there were smaller periods of time, half days in some cases, multiple hours in other cases, when a delivery would be scheduled where $260 a day would be prohibitive and would motivate actually the reverse behavior, would actually motivate someone to not get the permit and hope that the contractor comes and goes without anybody noticing, which we didn't want to do. So we had always thought of them as a package where we could increase the week-long, the single-day encroachment permit while still having a smaller permit that would allow someone to walk in and apply with Gerhard or the Public Works Department to say, we're having Golden State Lumber come from the hours of 9 to noon, and we'd like a single delivery encroachment permit. Something along those lines that would still encourage appropriate permitted work, but not provide the perhaps the disincentive to do it because of the 5 times the rate of what it was before.
So what I'm hearing here, I'm correct, is that you would rather that we bring a full package than do this piece by piece?
Yes, and I'm actually surprised that it requires a whole study. I would just almost argue just have a half day, one day in a week. Make it as simple as that, so that you can, and recognize that the half day is really for deliveries and incidental type encroachment, and not the full day when you have a concrete truck parked in front of the house.
And Amy, that goes to you. Can we do that?
I mean, not clearly now, but I think with the more comprehensive package.
I'm just a little confused because the proposal is for, oh, I see, there's not a half-day encroachment permit fee. Yes, you can continue it and do the fee studies. California fee law is extraordinarily complex and changing constantly. So most fees now require a fee study because you cannot make a profit off fees. You have to do a nexus between the fees and the benefits, and you have to ensure that the cost is simply to cover your costs of carrying out the business. We do at this time have this, the Constitution allows for the city to set fees for use of its own property without regard to that study. But we can certainly, it's really the council's pleasure. If you want to continue it for a full package, that is council's call.
So, but Amy, could we do, it sounds like we have the authority under the Constitution to have, in addition to a 1-week encroachment permit and a 1-day encroachment permit, a 1/2 day, and put that number at either, I think 53 is what we had talked about, Peter, in the Construction Impact Committee, but we can do that without a fee study. Is that right, Amy?
As it stands today, I believe that we can. So can't guarantee there won't be a case out next week telling us we can't. Yes, but this does assume that we're talking about interference with the use of the streets by other members of the public and not simply a delivery. And I think that's what we're talking about.
Yes. That is absolutely what we're talking about. Yeah.
Yes, we could do a 1/2-day encroachment fee. Yes.
I think Mayor Wilkinson, the point that Peter's making is that these encroachment and road closure fees work if we also have this 1/2 day fee, and they don't really work if we don't have that. But if we can do that legally, which is what Amy's saying we can do, I think we should pass that now. And then if there are other fees that require a fee study that are not connected to these kinds of road closures and encroachment permits, that we do that fee study, in the future. But they're not dependent. That fee study is not dependent on what we're talking about tonight.
But I want to understand this a little bit more, because my sense is that this last piece is the delta essentially. And so you've got to get to neutral on all of these different fees combined. And so that's why the study is required. It's not just for this one piece, or have I misunderstood that? Robert, can you explain to me why we might only need a fee study for this one remaining piece?
Yeah, maybe that's a question, Amy, better.
I don't believe you need a fee study for a 1/2-day encroachment fee. But we don't have it before council right now, and it's not in the staff report, and I don't think it's in the fee list. So we have a notice issue here. So it seems the best course of action might be to continue this item to next month and add in that 1/2-day encroachment fee, and then it can be added. We could do the whole package of these types of fees that don't require a fee study. I think there were some other fees that were raised by Construction Impact that are different categories that do require.
Okay, so let's discuss that, but I would like to hear as part of the discussion and research from staff the merits of a fee study or not, because I don't think they'd be asking for it if there wasn't some sense to it. So I'd like to understand that piece of it, because I guess my question would be, if we introduce all these fees and then we're over collecting, that's not cost recovery. And so what do we then do if we haven't done any analysis of that? Is that the rationale? Is that the reasoning? Is that why? Sorry, James, I'm sorry, James.
Thank you, Mayor Wilkinson. I think there's clearly a cost to closing the roads, which comes in the noticing and the staff time of putting out signs and noticing neighbors and the city that there is going to be a road closure. So I think I don't know what the average time that takes is, but the city should have a pretty good idea. They've done it that many times. So I'm not as concerned about us breaking the law and needing to show that there's an actual cost to the city in issuing notices to close a road. I'm not understanding the fee study myself, I guess, but if Robert thinks we need that, I support.
I think the way I understood the staff report is that we have the legal authority to impose these encroachment and road closure fees because, as it says on page 2, we're permitted to charge a fee for use of city property, meaning our roadways, where that use interferes with its normal use. And so there doesn't have to be a cost study for that. Isn't that right, Amy? But there are other fees that don't fall under that legal authority that would require a cost study. So the 2 encroachment fees, the full day and the week that we're proposing into this memo, and the road closures full day and week don't require a fee study, and a half day encroachment doesn't require a fee study either. There are other fees that we had proposed in the Construction Impact Committee report that would require a fee study. And so where that leaves us is Peter's very good suggestion that we really ought to have a half-day encroachment fee here, and we should. And Amy's point that we have a notice problem because that's not what's currently proposed. So I would propose that we take this, we continue it to next month. We come back with a proposal to include, in addition to the 4 revisions that are proposed today, a 5th one for a half-day encroachment fee. And we impose that, we approve that, and then for the other fees that would require a fee study, we conduct that because I do think that's important, but it's independent, it's distinct from what we're doing here.
But again, what I don't understand with this piece is why staff is hasn't included that $53 if it was a no-brainer and it didn't require any analysis.
I
Someone
think
can answer that for me.
Yeah, I think earlier the definition of that type of permit was a little bit unclear. The committee had established it or set it as a delivery-based permit. And I think per Amy's point, when you start getting into definitions like delivery, that's when it becomes a little, I would say, foggy around the law on this issue. So changing, being very clear on what the permit is, it's a type of encroachment permit, which is in between our week-long, the full day, and then the half day, I think clears up that issue, if I'm understanding that right, Amy?
I think that Jim summarized it absolutely beautifully. Most fees where we're requiring a fee as a condition for development to mitigate the effects on public facilities, what we call a mitigation fee, and regulatory fees when we are giving a permit, and it's to recover the costs of issuing the permit, the cost of inspections, the cost of licenses. Under our Constitution, those fees do require fee mitigation. It's not always easy to tell what fits in where. The Constitution has excluded from that class things that where, it's easiest to see this is when the city functions just like a private entity. If you want to use our property, if you want to rent our facilities, we're actually kind of a market participant more than a city. And so there is not currently, at this moment, under the Constitution, it doesn't impose that same reasonable relationship standard that we have on permitting fees, licensing fees, and development mitigation fees. So you wouldn't have to do a fee study to say that we want to allow rental of our community center for $10,000 a night. we don't have that requirement because we're actually being similar to a market participant. So when we're talking about closing streets, when we're talking about encroachments where it's public right of way, but you're using it in a way that doesn't allow other people access, we think it's reasonable to treat that in the Constitution just as rentals of city property. So in that case, we're saying we don't have to do a mitigation fee. There were some other examples, grading fees, if you're, cubic feet for the amount of dirt you would do. That would be something that would probably require a mitigation fee. And I'm going to say it's not easy to tell, and there's lots of case law on this. Supreme Court just handled a case about a franchise fee for waste hauling, and they said, hey, that might require a fee study, even though it's a contract. So it's really, really confusing area of law. So it isn't always clear, and it's super hard. And if you're interested in the subject, I can give you a League of Cities publication that's actually pretty good. That explains all the differences, but it's challenging. But I think that Vice Mayor Lynch summed it up very well. We believe we can do these small category of fees without the study. Most other types of fees require the fee studies. But we didn't have the half day in this report. So we do have an issue about the public not being on notice. So I think council can just not do any fees and wait for fee studies to bring a whole package, or council could adopt this limited category of fees once the notice issue is fixed.
Jim, would you like to make a motion?
I would move that we continue this item to December with direction to Robert and team to add in the 1/2 day encroachment fee and come back with a new noticed report or proposal, and we'll go from there.
Second.
And can I get a roll call?
Yes. Councilmember Campbell.
Aye.
Councilmember Chemnitzer.
Aye.
Councilmember Lynch.
Yes.
Councilmember Mark.
Yes.
Mayor Wilkinson.
Yes, motion passes. I think we're done. Thank you for everybody's patience with this meeting, and we will have a good night.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
All right, everyone.
Good night.